Friends and family were here together to celebrate and remember the life of Donald Richard Conner. Born in Ponca City, Osage County, Oklahoma, passed away peacefully at his home November 11th, 2020. Donnie was born in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, November 9th, 1942 to Richard Blaine Conner and Dorothy Ruth Pearson Conner. Donnie lived in Osage County until his death. He married Joyce Powelson on February 17, 1968 in Ponca City, Oklahoma. Donnie worked most of his life as a rancher on the Osage, as well as other ranching-related careers until his retirement in 2012. He graduated from Pawhuska High School in 1961. Donnie received his college education from Northern Oklahoma College in Tonkawa, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Go Pokes! He enlisted in the Air Force in 1964 and received his honorable discharge in 1968. He was an active member of the Elk Lodge in Pawhuska, as well as the American Legion Post 198 in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. He is a member of the Osage Nation. Donnie lived the life of ranching in the Osage. He loved it. He was an avid reader, enjoyed attending and listening to his son announce rodeos, attending his grandchildren's sporting events, as well as helping numerous kids with 4-H projects at livestock shows around Osage County. Most of all, Donnie loved spending time with family and helping others. After graduating high school, Donnie kept a very close relationship with all of his beloved classmates. He enjoyed dancing, singing, and spending time with them as a group. Donnie is survived by his wife Joyce of the home, his son Richard Conner and wife Mindy, their 3 children, Justy Gordon and her husband Trenton, Brittany Anderson and her husband, Gunnar Anson, 1 great-granddaughter, Hazel Jade Gordon, all of Beggs, Oklahoma, daughter Jenna Conner and husband Ernest Lennox Jr. of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and their daughter Mila Conner, sister Connie Schroeder and husband Ken of Mustang, Oklahoma, brother-in-law James Powelson of Ponca City and Johnny Powelson of Ponca City, as well as countless nieces, nephews, and close family friends. He is preceded in death by parents Richard Blaine and Dorothy Ruth Conner and brother Frankie Conner. At this time, the family has prepared a video celebrating Donnie's life that we will view at this time.
Today, I made a canyon sing about a saddle creaking, about a spur rouse jinging, about shod hooves making slate rock ring. Today, I made a canyon sing. Today, I made a blue grouse fly from a spruce tree down a mountainside. Lost my hat when my bay horse shied. Today, I made a blue grouse fly. Today I went where I'd never been, where the mountain stops and the sky begins, where the trees are bent from the snow and the wind. Today I went where I'd never been. made a sagebrush fire. Poured coffee on that pungent high. Man who says it's gone's a liar. 'Cause tonight I made a sagebrush fire. Well, I'm a cowboy and damn it, I'll stay the course. And as long as I can sit a horse, I'll make saddles creak and I'll make spur rouse Gene. And I'll find a canyon and I'll make it sing.
At this time, I would like to welcome Donnie's son, Richard, to come to the podium to say a few words.
First of all, I don't know if I need this microphone. I do this, speak behind it for a living, and my dad was very proud of what I did. I'm going to explain the definition very first thing before I start this poem. And once I read this poem, y'all will understand where it comes from. A poet. A poet is a man not just of rhyming words or singing or of rhythms, but he's a storyteller. A poet is a storyteller of things today or yesterday or things from 40 years ago. But he wanted to tell everybody about it today. I'm going to read you a poem from his only title is A Cowboy Poet. The title of this poem is Poet Cowboy. A cowboy has a special place in heaven when he dies. It's set aside just for those men who've had the hardest rides. It's filled with cattle, heat and rain and nights and spit on the ground. It's music sung to calm the herd at night when bedding down. No other angels enter there. It's toughness that they lack. They often wander out that way, but then they're herded back. Just only an exception was ever made, and that one God ordained, to put into words a cowboy's life through sun, wind, and rain. A poet wandered by one day, lured by the cattle call. He had little time upon a horse and drove him none at all. When St. Peter saw him standing there, he had to smile and say, "The road you need is to the left. That's where the softest beds lay." I like this place, the poet said. It's rowdy and full of strife. Those clouds back there were much too calm and devoid of any life. Could I stay here and learn the ropes? I'll work hard for my pay. I could write songs about the boys to sing at the end of the day. St. Peter took his Stetson off and he spoke in a doubtful tone. "Well, I don't know," he finally said, "if such a thing is done. I'll ask the boss, as foreman here. He might need more good men. If you'll work for your chuck with some luck, he'll welcome you on it." So St. Peter left the gate unmanned and signed out, "Gone to lunch." It wasn't long until he returned and looked pleased as punch. "A man of words," St. Peter said. "God feels is needed here to soothe the cowboy's pain at night and calm the restless tears. So welcome in, poet of the range. Once minstrel of the earth, a cowboy you have now become. Here's no greater worth. I'll get your tackle for those drives to last forever here. I'll find a horse that fits your needs along with your other gear." And thus it was a place filled within the cowboy realm. A poet was hired to do a job not normally found in heaven. Long he thought about his task and what he needed to be told, and ere too long the stories came and started to unfold. He wrote of long cattle drives from Cheyenne to Santa Fe. He told of hardships without end and trials along the way. Heat and drought, wind, floods, and flies that pierced the hide. Bulky steers and hardtack mules and broncs no man could ride. He wrote of nights beneath the stars with the prairie stretching out and rivers crossed and cattle lost and rustlers all about. And then he penned about those men whose solitary lives left little room at the end of the day for hearth and home and wives. And when he read those stories around the campfire every night, he knew that he belonged right there, for it suited him just right. No eye was dry within the crowd of a toughened old trailed hands, for what was said had been lived and all could understand. So when you get to heaven's gate, come see this cowboy clan. We're all the same, poet says, just wearing a different brand. There's one bunkhouse that holds all of us beyond the setting sun, and God's roundup brings us all home when our last trail is done. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad dreamed and believed in Osage County. He wanted to be a cowboy. But I always remember one thing, and everybody in here can probably vouch and say and agree with me, that he also could tell a story. My dad was a poet, and he knew more stories about things from the past and things in the future. And that's why I think this poem fits so much well for my dad, that he was a poet who always dreamed to be a cowboy, and now he is. Thank you. But I've also been asked today to, hang on, honey. I've also been asked today to share a few stories. And the one that comes to my mind, I just learned about the night my dad passed away. Okay? Would you please stand up? My beautiful, loving wife that I've had for the last 11 years. First time I believe she probably ever met my dad. She asked him about all the pictures, have you ever been to my house, from my California cousins, the Indian artists, and all the postcards. And you can sit down, I just want everybody to see who he was. You're so pretty. So as she's asking, and if you ever been to our house, my mom's not one on sunshine. She keeps some old heavy curtains going, and it's kind of dark. But there was the picture from Kathleen, and their postcard from Pat, and there was some other Indian art, and then over here there's a picture of a horseback cowboy. Mindy didn't think nothing about it. Is that you? My dad said, yeah. Never knew it. I never knew it. She never mentioned it to me. She never... So things started calming down. On Thursday, we come to the funeral home, and Mr. Mike says, we need to get some pictures. I said, okay. We're driving back. We drove 2 separate cars. My wife said, man, there's this picture. I got this great idea. We're going to use that picture of him on horseback. And I didn't think nothing about it. Never said a word, because I was like, what picture is she talking about? Horseback. My dad's a cowboy, but I don't remember us having any. So we all sit down there and ate dinner. And we'll stop right there for 1 minute, because I forgot to tell. And my dad's a jokester, especially to the ones he loves, and he always picked at them. And my wife was one of them. So this is going on, and we're sitting there at the dinner table. And finally she says, guys, let's use the picture of horseback. I'm looking at her. And I said, what picture of a horseback are you talking about? And she turned around, and right above my mom and dad's TV is a picture of a horseback cowboy. I looked at it real close from the dinner table, and I said, I giggled. And she said, what are you giggling about? I said, you ever heard of Ben's son Johnson, the actor? She said, yeah, I know who he is. You talk about him. He's a family friend. If you look in the corner of that picture, that's his Roper advertisement, a signed autograph picture of Ben John, son, the actor. And she goes, your dad told me 12 years ago that that was him, and I never questioned that. All I can say right now, Dad, you got her, and I don't know how she's going to fix this one. You know, we were talking stories, and I've heard people, our cousins from California are watching it here. They talk about my dad. He went to a one-room school, if you all don't know that, Pearsonia, Oklahoma. That's where he's born. That's where I was raised. That's where I always wanted to be a cowboy. He went to a one-room school for the first 6 years of it. He was the only boy. 14 girls he went to school with for 6 years. You know, when we moved out there, they would tell me that, and that one-room school still stood there. I was like, man, that's no wonder my dad's a dancer, and my dad, he didn't have no choice. No wonder he liked music. And I really never thought to ask my dad, how many times did you have to wear makeup or play with dolls when you were 14 girls? Still not going to ask him. You don't have to answer me either. But Kathleen sent me some stories last night, and they talked about it. He loved this cousins of his, and everybody, all the girls he was raised with, and everybody, you know, she talked about him. The girls would make peanut butter and banana sandwiches when they were growing up, and Dad's just 8 or 9 years old. And they would make those sandwiches, and he would go out and gather up all their riding horses, and he would saddle all them horses for them girls, and they would ride all afternoon. They talk about, I didn't know about this. Talk about my dad building a boat. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories about a boat. First one is going to explain the second one. My dad bought a boat one time. We lived in Winona, Oklahoma. I don't think we had that boat 48 hours. My sister was still a baby in my mama's arms. We put that boat on Bluestem Lake, and a storm blew up. We ran out of gas in the middle of Bluestem Lake. All I can remember is my mama saying a bunch of words that were real loud, screechy, and them talking. I can remember the lightning crashing and flashing, and we pulled into this fishing dock. And I heard my mom, as my dad's going out that door, that will be the last time that we ever get in this brand new boat. She wasn't kidding. I can remember us pulling home and then putting us all to bed. And the next morning there was a for sale sign on that boat. So I didn't know nothing about boats back when I was growing up, because my mama wasn't about to get another boat with my daddy. So this story here caught me off guard. My dad and them girls from California, we call them the girls from California, Kathleen and Pat and all them, they decided, my dad's 9 years old, and they're a little bit older than him, that they're going to build a boat. They built a boat. My girl said, we need a rope. Dad said, nah, we don't need no rope. It'll float, but we need a dock. And they load this all up in a wagon, and they pull it out to the pond, and they build this dock that day. And they build this raft. And I can only imagine, because like I said, we was having a little bit of trouble here, and my dad was trying to mess with the machinery. So, but they built this dock, they built this boat, and Kathleen said, we need to attach this rope. Dad said, nah, don't need this rope. Kathleen said, we're tying this rope on this boat. They get my dad, and I know where this pond is at. It's right out in front of the house at Pearsonia, out there in the pasture, and it's pretty deep in the middle. They get this boat in the middle with my dad in it because he's taking the test drive. Well, there wasn't no test drive because they never got that boat back. They got it to the middle, and my dad started screaming, pull the rope, pull the rope. And Kathleen said she wanted to tell him, there ain't no rope, there ain't no rope. But that's enough stories from me. I grew up with him. I know how my dad was. There wasn't a person my dad wouldn't help. There wasn't a person my dad wouldn't give his shirt off his back. My mom and dad started 2 4-H programs, I know, and some of those kids are sitting here today. You seen those pictures? Those were at Morley Ranch, or what we called the Morley Ranch. We weighed cattle, and he took care of everybody. But if you all got any stories to share, I'd like for you all to share them right now. This is the time to do it. We all know my dad. My dad, all the way up to the very last day, knew every one of my kids and my grandkids and was very proud of them. You know, I'm going to call you out, Brother Jeff, because he asked about you every day, every time I talked to him. He didn't forget nobody. All the way to the end. I talked to him on Monday, and he was a very, very alert and knew everything. Sorry. So if you all got any stories at this time, would you all please share them with me? Just stand up and tell me about them, because I know they're out there. JR, you all know him. Ronnie Sturt, I see you. We all lived right down the road from him. And I'm not calling you all out. I got all the greatest respect in the world for every one of y'all.
Well, I wanted to mention that Joyce and Donnie, when they got married, they moved out to my place out north of town. That was the first place they lived at. And we had a lot of fun during those years. Thank you for bringing Donnie out my place. Thank you.
Does anybody else got anything to say? Go ahead, Keith.
I'm trying to make this real quick. It's not, I don't think it's exactly about Donnie, it's about his sister that I'm married to.
That's fine.
She'll probably deny it, but I swear I heard it from her own lips. Maybe I won't get every detail right, but she was out. When she was a child, she was out visiting her aunt and uncle in California. And I think for some reason they had occasion to go over to Ben Johnson's house and check on him. And I think maybe they stayed overnight. And Connie got thirsty in the middle of the night, and she got up to get a drink of the water. And she was going back towards the bedroom. She heard the doorbell ring, so she got behind the curtain. And John Wayne was at the door, and he come in to talk business in the middle of the night with Ben Johnson. And she overheard part of it, I guess. I guess they didn't find her. Anyway, she'll probably deny that, but I heard that story a long time ago from her.
I can tell you a story right now at Pearsonia, Oklahoma, when my Aunt Connie and my dad were raised there, that my dad used to tell me a story about, I had a visitor. He had some hunting dogs. You know what I'm talking about, Connie, the little beagle dog?
Had what?
Had the little beagle dog.
Oh, yeah.
Man, my dad somehow convinced this guy, he had some pretty good dogs, that his sister sure needed a dog. My dad always told me about a week later there was a dog sitting on her porch from that man. He took care of his girls. He took care of everybody. I mean, there's all kinds of, my dad can remember when he first got with my mom, I always remember this because I was always thinking, man, I worked for my grandpa. We always could drive around the mile section, or we could get around and push tools. And my dad was in the military. He come home to help leave. They get all them combines stuck, and my dad's trucking them chains across because they couldn't get the chains to it. They could put the tractors to it through the mud and the muck. And he gets poison ivy so bad at that same time, because I know exactly probably where he got it, because I think I got it there too. Down in them pecan groves. He gets poison ivy so bad that he's on his way back to orders, because he was on leave, and he was so scared to get AWOL that he pulled into a gas station, and by the time he pulled into the gas station, about halfway, I think he was at the radar site at Montana up on the Canadian border. He gets about halfway home and his eyes are swelled shut. He's got poison ivy so bad, he's so swelled up that the gas attendant actually put him in the hotel room and called the people, whoever he needed to call, and say, look, he's not going to make it. But my dad wouldn't have missed harvest for my grandpa, my uncle, and my mom's family. That was just the type of person he was. You know, it didn't matter what my little sister did. He would make her get up and go show pigs or work her animals, but he was always there to help her and encourage her. And he was very proud of my sister. You know, she's the first one of us that she is the first one of us that completed college. I had to take a little break, come back to it. But so that was my dad. My dad will never tell you he's a cowboy. There's a man that I respect without most greatest of all for the rodeo business. He's a rancher in South Dakota. His name's Harry Bold of Bold Rodeo Company. Harry Bold will tell you the same thing. I'm not a cowboy. But every day I go to a rodeo, and every day I get up in the morning, I get to put my cowboy hat on. And when I put my cowboy hat on, it don't matter if I get a horseback, or if I'm in the feed truck, or if I'm just watering the chickens. I feel like a cowboy. And that was my dad. So thank you all for being here and sharing this time with me. I appreciate it very much. I'm not in trouble.
Are you begging for
I might be.
forgiveness now?
I might be begging for forgiveness.
There is another song that was listed on the program that we will have now in memory of Donnie. As we pause here this afternoon to remember the life of Donnie, I've met so many of you, friends and family, that have so many different memories and stories and experiences. Some of you have known him all your life. Some of us only knew him for a short time. But there's one experience that we all are sharing here today. As we come today here, we are here today for his memorial. Now, none of us likes these times. If you think about it, people will line the street for a movie or a concert or even Black Friday shopping, or even come to an event like a rodeo, and people will come from all over with joy and anticipation, but we never see such anticipation for a funeral. And why is that? I think it's because at a funeral, we're reminded of three painful truths. That one, we mourn the fact that a loved one has experienced death. We're reminded that there is such a thing as death and that it takes our loved ones from us. And three, we are reminded that one day we too will have to travel this road and experience death ourselves. But despite these realities today, a funeral also gives us time to do something else. It's a time to remember and celebrate the impact that our loved one has had on our lives, and we do not leave it today here without hope. So as the family asked me to share a few words about Donnie, I came up with a few reflections on his life. The first I would say is that Donnie was a man of the land. Every time I visited Donnie, he would one day, way or another, bring up how he loved living out in the Osage. Now, I'm sure God will forgive me for editorializing, but in Genesis, when God created the earth and he formed and fashioned it for man to give to man to steward, I have to wonder if in eternity past, a little portion of Osage County was carved out in eternity past and given to Donnie. Because he felt a special connection to it. It could have been because of his Osage lineage going back to that noble tribe and their love for the land. He loved the land and he grew up working on it. He shared stories about his grandpa, how his grandpa would drive him hard to building fences. And even if he said how hard and cold it was, you would see that gleam in his eye because you knew he loved it. He loved being out there. Special verse, I would say, for a rancher, Proverbs 21:5, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. Though at times he would talk about how hard and how cold the winter could be, you could tell that he loved working his land and he did so diligently. Donnie not only cared for his beloved Osage land, but he also cared for his country as a whole through his service in the United States Air Force. Oftentimes when a brave soldier, airman, sailor, or Marine lays down their life, we hear John 15:13 quoted, greater love has no man than that he lays down his life for his friends. And while I don't want to take away from the sacrifice of that verse at all, I think this also includes those who give of themselves in the service and defense of this country as well. Donnie protected installations way up there north, but those installations were, and many still are, crucial to allowing us to live in peace. And even after he got out of the service, I know for a time he worked security, showing that he even valued protecting the property of others and protecting their land as well. Donnie's life teaches us that we should honor and love the land that we are blessed to live in. His life shows us that it is good to do hard work. It is good to take care of the land we have been given. And it is good and honorable to serve and protect your land and your country. He was a man of his land. But as we know, a man is not just defined by his work, he's also defined by his relationship. I would say he was a man who loved others as well. Donnie's family spoke to me about how generous a man he was. You've heard today he was described as someone who would help you, who would give the shirt off his back, who even after he worked a busy day would not be too busy to help a friend or a neighbor or even a stranger. He and his family were also quick to bring you in as one of their own if you got to know them. It would seem that Donnie was never afraid to expand his family to include others because he loved people. When Donnie was going to high school, as was mentioned in Pawhuska, his family shared those stories of the very close reactions, but they even used this joke, and permit me to do this. They said that Donnie was a ladies' man, but that was on account of the fact that he was the only male in a room full of ladies, so they only had one choice. So, but still, even with that, these classmates loved him, and they stayed in his family the whole time. The joke was the girlfriends followed him around all through his life. But I think that's just a testament to how intimately he brought in people and how he loved them, and they loved him. Once you were in for life with Donnie. He never knew a stranger, and he would welcome you with open arms. I remember from the time I met him, even when he was sick, every time I would leave, his last words for me were, "Come back anytime." I was welcome there. As I got to know him more, he would joke with me, and he was very quick-witted even in his condition. One visit I made, I happened to show up, and his nurse and his aide were present, and so I made my visit. I said a prayer with him, and as I went to leave, he calls out in this anguished voice. I thought he was serious. He said, "You aren't going to leave me, are you?" And so, as a chaplain, that just kind of breaks your heart. Oh man, is something going on? So I turn around, and he's smiling, and he says, "You aren't going to leave me alone with all these crazy women, are you?" And I knew at that point he kept his humor and his wit. Donnie may not have been thinking of this passage. He may not have even memorized it, but I think his life exemplified it. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 tells us, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, if I deliver up my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing." And then, of course, we get those familiar passages said at weddings about love being patient and kind and does not boast. But in verse 13, it says this, "So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love." I do not believe Donnie ever lost sight of that truth, that a man can gain everything. A man could gain all of the land in Osage County, but if he had not love, he was nothing. And he remembered that. And then finally, Donnie was a man who, like all of us, faced his own mortality. The Bible says in Hebrews, "It is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, the judgment." Donnie's appointment happened these past few days in November. And death reminds us that we live in a fallen world. Genesis 3 outlines something that we all can generally agree on, in that it's just this simple truth. The world isn't as it should be. Because of a fallen world, we experience very good and happy times, but also very trying and difficult times. And it is also this reason that every single one of us will face death. Death is our enemy. Will Rogers once comedically spoke, "This world would be a great world to dance in if we didn't have to pay the fiddler." Death makes us feel powerless, and funerals put an exclamation point on that powerlessness. However, there is great hope. So I'll take you to a funeral 2,000 years ago. There's another man who has passed away, a dear brother. His sisters remain. And from the family's perspective, Jesus showed up 3 days too late. So as he's cresting the hill, the sister Martha runs and falls at his feet in almost an anguish and maybe a little bit of grief, definitely grief and understandable anger that comes at grief. She says to the Lord Jesus, "Lord, if you had only been here." And Jesus says these words to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" And so if it were me standing there, I might ask, "Well, what do you mean, Jesus? I am the resurrection. What do you mean everyone who lives and believes in me will never die?" Because at first glance, From the time that was spoken till now, the going death rate in the world is 100%. That would seem to prove Jesus wrong, but look at what he is talking about, the resurrection. What's that? Well, just as Christ died on the cross, so he also rose from the dead, and not only did he rise from the dead, but those who believe in him will also rise from the dead in eternal life. Donnie was a good man. Many of us are good people, but none of us are perfect people. In fact, the man speaking to you right now is not a perfect man. There are really only two types of people, the imperfect people who know Jesus and the imperfect people who do not. And those who know Jesus face with death with hope, and I know that Donnie knew this. As we close, I do not want to give you all the impression that this is the end. This service is not merely a bookend on a long life lived. In fact, I would submit to you that Donnie is enjoying things that we can only anticipate in this life. The old preacher Charles Spurgeon said, "Depend upon it, your dying hour will be the best hour you've ever known. Your last moment will be your richest moment. Better than the day of your birth will be the day of your death. It shall be the beginning of heaven, the rising of a sun that shall go no more down forever." When Donnie closed his eyes on earth, the next sight he saw, if you will permit me to editorialize here, was Jesus welcoming him to land that far exceeds his beloved Osage. As we gather here this afternoon, it would be tempting to believe that this is goodbye. Oftentimes at funerals, we say goodbye, and I hate that word because it has an awful sense of finality. And by itself, goodbye is not a good word to use at the death of a loved one. And some of you who were there the day he passed, I shared this, and I want to share this again. Your family, Richard, Joyce, and Jenna, you've all honored me by being a part of Donnie's life and being here now. And so I want to share something from my heritage. On my side of the family, I'm Cherokee. In the Cherokee language, there is no word that expresses the finality of goodbye. We just don't have that word. But we have this word, and it goes like this, Dona da gohui. Dona da gohui. And it literally means until we meet again. When one Cherokee departs from the other, we say that to each other because we don't say goodbye because there is no goodbye. We're united together in blood and in this case in faith. So when Donnie parted from this life, there is not a final goodbye, but until we meet again. And I love that because I think it's very similar to what Jesus says when he comforted his disciples in the face of his own death. He said, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." So today, in the midst of sorrow and sadness at the physical absence of Donnie, we do not leave here today saying to Donnie, who was a husband, a father, a grandfather, a brother, and a son, we don't say, "My brother, goodbye," but Donnie, Dona da gohui, until we meet again. We will now have military honors presented by the United States Air Force Honor Guard.
If able, please stand for the playing of military honors. You may be seated.
At this time, I will close us in prayer, and then we will be dismissed by Trout. Please bow with me. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the life of Donnie. Lord, I thank you for his wonderful heritage that is sitting here today, Lord, by all these people here, all the lives he impacted. The stories we could tell would probably last for days. But in the absence of that time, Lord, I pray that in the coming days that you will bring so many memories to life, that you would bring a smile on people's face as they remember Donnie. Lord, in the days to come, I pray for grace, mercy, and peace for the family as they have to move on in life with Donnie having gone before them. But until that blessed day when we experience the most wonderful family reunion we will ever know, I pray that you would give us the grace to get through each day, that you would give us everything that we need, and that you would have us leave here today with hearts filled with hope, knowing that we will see Donnie again. Until that great day, keep us, hold us, love us. In Christ's name I pray, amen.